Our reflection today is on our 20th century saint, Maximillian Kolbe. Born on 8 January 1894 in Zduńska Wola, Poland, his country was divided by hatred and politics. His father, Julius Kolbe, a working-class citizen, struggled under the effects of this disunity, where the bonds of love and understanding did not prevail among the citizens of Poland, largely due to the occupation of Russia, Prussia, aka Germany, and Austria. His three sons, Francis, Raymond, who was later named Maximilian in his religious order, and Joseph, would experience the same social consequences. As a child, Raymond dreamed the political reunification of their motherland would come about through the valorous efforts of some knights of Our Lady of Czestochowa. His courageous and generous soul to undertake great things for his country was intensified by his ardent devotion to the glorious patroness of Poland. This special dedication to the Mother of God could easily be attributed to the influence of his own virtuous mother, Maria Dąbrowska, who formed his early years in the daily recitation of the Angelus, the Holy Rosary, and the Litany to Our Lady. The practice of his pious Marian devotions, however, would not subdue young Raymond's natural, mischievous nature. At some point, when the youngster was finally reprimanded by his mother, she raised the question as to what would become of him if he continued his naughty behaviour. Tearfully, he presented himself before the Blessed Virgin Mary and humbly asked her the same question of himself. In response, Our Lady showed him 2 crowns, one red, the other white. When asked to choose which he preferred, he chose both, to remain pure and undivided in his love for God and the Blessed Virgin, and to be a martyr. Only a saint can make such a generous choice. Saints are the ones who desire to do astounding things for God. Saints have magnanimous ambition, not because they trust in themselves, because they are urged on by a profound and unbounded love. In the footsteps of St. Francis as a friar. At age 13, Raymond Kolbe became fascinated by the Franciscan ideals preached by 2 conventual Franciscans who conducted a parish mission at his church in Pambiance, 1907. Soon thereafter, he and his elder brother Francis entered the Franciscan Minor Seminary at Lwów. During his formation and study there, the makings of a saint continued to deepen. He fervently sought to draw profit from all the means accessible for his personal sanctification. St. Maximilian fought Kolbe as a friar. He sought diligent care to assimilate the instruction he received to put them into immediate action. Never did he shun occasions to make sacrifices and to vigorously uproot all that was inordinate in his being. Prayer, that therefore was the mainstay of his passionate soul, deriving great benefit from his many hours before the Blessed Sacrament. But most of all, he nourished a tender and profound love for the Blessed Virgin Mary, whose devotion is at the very heart of Franciscan life as the inseparable reality of its Christ-centeredness. On 4 September 1910, Raymond Kolbe entered the novitiate of the conventual Franciscans, meaning of the convent. Being invested with the Franciscan habit, he was given the new name of Friar Maximilian Mary. Just as most saints, Friar Maximilian also underwent countless trials and tribulations. He had scruples and doubts during his years of formation. The largesse of his soul, however, compelled him to do great things for Our Lady, pressing him on to leave the order and join the military forces in defence of Poland, his motherland, under Our Mary's patronage. It was proven, however, that God's plan for him was a different military nature, and he finally came to understand this mission was being fought on a spiritual battlefield. The militia of the Immaculate Movement. Having been sent to Rome to further his theological studies, his magnanimous soul found its expression in the intensity of his love for the Immaculate. His Franciscan formation augmented his thirst for the Christ-centeredness of the order's spirituality and its theological bent, with emphasis on the primacy of Christ. In the devotional level, this primacy is equated to the triumph of the most sacred heart of Jesus. Such emphasis on the Christ's power and redemptive love finds its most perfect fulfillment in the Immaculate. And Friar Maximillian gradually discovered that in order to be a saint, one must be conformed to the likeness of Christ, a likeness which is authenticated in the perfection of the Immaculate. To be a saint demands a total response to love, which made possible only through the help of grace. Mary, being immaculate, i.e. full of grace, mediates these graces from God through her spousal bond with the Holy Spirit. This Franciscan intellectual tradition influenced Saint Maximilian in founding a movement which had its underlying dogmatic truth on Mary's role in the economy of man's sanctification and salvation, a role that ultimately leads one to the fastest, easiest, and surest way to becoming like Jesus. Having obtained from his superiors at the conventual Franciscan Collegio Serafecia in Rome, this movement, named the Knights of the Immaculate, Militia Immaculata, or the MI, was founded on the eve of 16 October 1917, a year before Friar Maximilian's ordination. Along with 6 other friars, he consecrated himself totally to the Immaculate and drafted the simple MI statutes of this Marian Franciscan movement. Even to this very day, its goal continues to be the sanctification of as many souls as possible under the patronage of the Blessed Virgin Mary. When he returned to Poland as a young priest in 1919, he was appointed professor of the Franciscan seminaries in Krakow. However, because of his failing health and having contracted tuberculosis, he was deemed unsuitable for this task. His superiors decided to assign him the office of confessor. In his weakened condition, he was increasingly frail, and he was consigned to the sanitarium at Zakopane. And his zeal for souls, characteristic of a true saint, did not diminish because of his physical ailments. He provided various spiritual services among his sick companions and instilled in them a love of Our Lady. And having recovered from a long confinement, which served as a period of silence and purification for him, he was prepared to launch a new apostolic endeavor, the likes of which had never before been seen in Poland or in the world: the City of the Immaculate, Ni Polkanola. During his work, he started a paper which was published throughout all of Warsaw, and it had 800,000 subscribers. This continued throughout the first years of the war, and the Nazis allowed it to continue. He allowed and helped more than 6,000 Jews to escape from the war through his paper. They used his paper as a way to travel. They followed the carriers, and then they came upon the paper's publication offices, and then he secreted them out of Poland. But then he was arrested, and they reduced his publication, and then he was arrested again by the Nazis, and this second arrest was the final arrest. This time he was taken to Auschwitz. On 17 February 1941, Father Maximillian was arrested by the Nazis for the second time. Only hours before the Gestapo arrived, he completed his final and most comprehensive theological essay on the Virgin Mary's identity as one who is perfectly united to the Holy Spirit as a bond of love. Sorry, my screen just timed out. There it is. Soon after, in the concentration camp, Father Maximilian would translate his theological and spiritual insights into practical words and actions for his fellow inmates by tangibly showing that there is a God, and therefore love and hope even exist in the midst of the horrific genocide in the camps of Auschwitz. Only a saint can stand firm with constancy and unwavering hope throughout life's many difficulties and sufferings. Only a saint can influence others to do the same, because only a saint knows the true and perfect peace is found in God alone. For the saint, trials don't weaken, they fortify. Serenity and calmness amid atrocities are not a sign of defeat, but of victory, for love is greater than hatred. In July of 1941, it was reported to the deputy camp commander that a prisoner from St. Maximilian's barracks had escaped. In order to set an example and to prevent further escapes, the standard procedure was for the commander of the barrack to single out 10 men for the starvation bunker. Father Maximilian, although not of the 10 first selected, volunteered, in a heroic act of charity, to be the victim in place of a prisoner who cried out, "My poor wife, my poor children." The result of this self-offering was that Father Maximilian would be assigned to the infamous starvation bunker, where he would slowly but surely die. At this precise moment, the victim saint attained full conformity to the victim of the cross. For there is no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for a friend. John 15:12. The patron saint of our difficult century, Pope John Paul II in St. Maximilian, Kolbe. On the night of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, 14 August 1941, Father Maximilian's 2-week ordeal in the starvation bunker was brought to an end by an injection of carbolic acid. According to an eyewitness, who was an assistant janitor at that time in his prison cell, Kolbe led the prisoners in prayer. Each time the guards checked on him, he was standing or kneeling in the middle of the cell and looking calmly at those who entered. After they had been starved and deprived of water for 2 weeks, only Kolbe remained alive. The guards wanted the bunker empty, so they gave Kolbe a lethal injection of carbolic acid. Kolbe is said to have raised his left arm, and Kolbe calmly waited for the deadly injection. He died on 14 August. His remains were cremated on 15 August, the feast day of the Assumption of Mary. His death was the crowning of a lifetime of Marian mysticism. Years later, in June 1979, Pope John Paul II would visit St. Maximilian's death chamber in Auschwitz, proclaiming him the patron saint of our difficult age. The miracles that were used to confirm his beatification were the July 1948 cure of intestinal tuberculosis of Angela Testoni, and the July 1950 the cure of calcification of arteries and sclerosis of Francis Renier, both attributed to Kolbe's intercession by the prayers to him. St. Maximilian Kolbe is the patron saint of amateur radio operators, of drug addicts, of political prisoners, of families of journalists, of prisoners, and of the pro-life movement.